This is a story of how a 20-year-old genealogy enthusiast accomplished what generations of seasoned investigators couldn't: solving one of Pennsylvania's oldest cold cases. March 18th, 1964 began like any other day in the Shiverilla household. She would put on her earrings, slip her silver ring with a small diamond onto her finger. Maurice had a special mission that morning, as her teacher was celebrating a feast day, and Maurice wanted to honor her with a gift. But this act of kindness would change everything. Maurice decided to leave early so she could drop off the canned goods at her classroom before attending daily mass. But what would happen next would remain a mystery for nearly 6 decades. Maurice encountered someone who would change her life and end it forever. And police were contacted, and the search would begin through the streets of Hazleton. Man decided to give his 16-year-old nephew driving lessons, but that's when something caught their attention, and at first glance, it looked like a large doll had been discarded among the refuse. What he discovered would haunt him for the rest of his life, because there, among the garbage and debris that filled the abandoned coal stripping pit, lay the body of a small child. And the child would be a deceased Maurice. So the initial investigation was thorough and immediate, and began the painstaking process of trying to understand what had happened to Maurice. But despite months of intensive investigation, leads began to dry up. Months turned into years. The investigation evolved from active case to cold case. And in 2020, a completely different kind of investigator would take an interest in the Maurice Shiverilla case. So in 2020, after months of careful research, Schubert identified a distant cousin of the perpetrator in the genealogy database. And this was the crucial breakthrough that would eventually lead to solving the case. But as Schubert's research progressed, one name began to emerge as the most likely suspect: James Paul Forte. He had been 22 years old at the time of Maurice's murder and lived just 6 or 7 blocks from the Shiverilla family home. There was one significant problem. James Paul Forte had died in 1980. 42 years before the case was solved. Investigators had to extract usable DNA from tissue samples that were more than 40 years old, then compared to DNA evidence from that crime scene, which was 58 years previous. So on February 3rd, 2022, the results would come back. And the DNA from James Paul Forte's remains was a perfect match to the DNA evidence from Maurice Shiverrilla's murder. So after nearly 58 years, the case had finally been solved.